Hello, everybody. We'd like to welcome Miss Makover, who is here to talk to everybody about what you can expect going forward as 8th grade parents. If you have any questions as she is speaking, you can put them in the Q&A portion at the bottom, and they'll be addressed. Either someone will type back or she'll answer your questions during a question and answer period. All right. Thank you very much and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we're trying to figure out the technology here. I'm sorry I won't be able to see you or you see me, but I'm going to talk you through a presentation about 8th to 9th course selection. We also have on this panel Marissa Merlino, who is the Director of Counseling at the high school. And at the end with questions, she will be able to answer some questions as well. And Jess Swiatowicz is here as well. So I'm just going to jump right in. I wanted to preface by saying that the course selection process for 8th to 9th grade is pretty simple. I have a child in high school and now in college, and I know for those of you who have your first going into high school, it might feel overwhelming and a lot of decisions to be made. It's a very exciting time, and it's a great transition going to the high school, and we'll be doing a lot to support students in that endeavor. But again, I just want to say it's pretty simple, the actually scheduling process, and we do a lot to inform the kids and help them navigate that process. So I'm going to throw a lot of details at you, but I just want you to remember that when it comes down to choosing classes, students are recommended for a few classes. A few classes are requirements that are just put in, and then ultimately a student is left with 2 elective choices depending on the recommendations. And so it's pretty simple again. So I'm just going to start by talking first about the timeline that we've set up for students and parents so they could be aware. I know Mr. Swiatowicz also sent out on a Connect Ed some of those dates, and we'll reiterate that and have them also. This PowerPoint will be on the website, so you could look at them. You could look at this information after the fact. So today, obviously December 15th, we're doing this presentation and discussing the scheduling process overall. The week of January 9th, I will be talking to all the students in social studies class. It'll be a very similar presentation to a lot of the slides here, talking them through things about the high school and the course selection process. So I will go into the social studies classes on the week of January 9th to do a presentation. Then on January 24th, the high school will have their own curriculum night. And while I'll try to give you some information about the electives and courses, you will hear more information at the high school directly from them with what's offered and that evening. So please put that in your calendars, because that would be, especially if it's your first child going to the high school, that would be a great evening to join. After that, the week of January 24th, teachers will share recommendations with students for math, science, and world language. As I mentioned earlier, those are classes that there's different options for, depending on what class you're in now. So teachers will be making a recommendation for the next sequence in those classes on that date. And in February 1st, the parent portal will open for 8th grade students, and parents will have the opportunity to input course requests for their electives only. I just want to say at that time, you might look in the portal and see the recommendations that were made for math and science. There's a separate process for that. If those recommendations are what you've hoped and you want to make a change, there'll be a separate waiver process for that. But the February 1st is when the portal opens for you to input the electives only. February 3rd, the recommendations that I spoke about, math, science, and world language, will be on comments on the second trimester interim report. So that will be sent home, so you know what the teachers in those areas are recommending for your child moving forward to the high school. And then you see in parentheses, it says waivers become available. So again, if you talk to your child and you decide that you might want to go against an initial recommendation, we have a process for that to sign a waiver. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So February 5th, the portal closes for 8th grade students for elective choices. So the February 1st to the 5th is your opportunity to enter the electives. There's, again, we'll go into the details further in the presentation. There's 2 elective choices for students, depending on the needs in your schedule. There's up to 2 elective choices, and we'll talk about all those electives in a little bit. Just finishing on the timeline. So I had, in January, I got into classes, talked to students, and presented about the course selection. I will follow up with students individually the week of February 6th out of their PE classes. I'll sit outside and I'll meet with them individually and review what's in the portal for their electives and see if they have any thoughts, any changes, and just, eyeball to make sure what they've put in makes sense and fits in their schedule. On March 17th, the second trimester report card, there any additional teacher recommendations in math science, only if there's changes, will be on that report card. And then we have a deadline for the waiver process for math and science on March 31st. So deadline for parents to waive their child into a course that their child was not recommended for and to change elective choices. So that's a combined deadline. We need time to plan for what courses in the high school, how many classes we need in each area. So there'll be a waiver process for the math and science and also a deadline for the elective choices. And then finally in August, schedules will be available on the portal. So that's just the nuts and bolts of the scheduling timeline. And then we'll continue. So when I go into classes, I talk to the kids generally about some of the terminology that maybe they haven't heard before. We talk about graduation requirements. I do want to highlight that the course description guide, which is on the high school website, is a great resource. We've kind of culled out the stuff that's relevant for rising for the 8th grade into 9th. So it's not so cumbersome, but if you really want, it's a great opportunity to look at that, to take a look at all the sequences from 9th grade to senior year and see what's offered, not just 9th grade, but moving forward. So I talked to the students about the concept of graduation requirements. We talk about the concept of a credit, because some of them haven't heard or understand what that means, that you're earning credit by being in a class. 1 credit is for a class that meets every day for the year. Half a credit is an alternate day class, and talk about the idea that, the only way you don't earn credit is if you don't pass a class. And and then we talk a little bit about what a transcript is and how that reflects their academic profile on paper. And further in the presentation, here it is. This is a copy, and I'll show them, of a high school transcript. If you see in the upper right corner, we've given them plenty of notice that some students are already taking credit-bearing high school courses, if they're in algebra or science, and that their foreign language, the accumulation of the 3 years, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, earns them a credit, and their final 8th grade grade goes on their high school transcript. If you can see, this is an example of a student who took all those 3 classes, and their grades are reflected. So the transcript is a list of all the classes they take, the credit they've earned in that class, the final grades, and it really is their academic profile. It's a story of who they are academically. And it also lists the required Regents exams as well. So I speak to the students about that in the presentation in January. So now we're going to move on, just talking about the 9 periods in the day and what options are available. So there's 9 periods in the day at the high school. Students will take English, social studies, math, science, world language, phys ed is a requirement. The sciences in 9th grade have a lab component, which is alternate day. So you see that alternating with phys ed, for an example. There's a period of lunch. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's 2 periods, depending on the needs in your schedule, there's 2 periods left of elective options. Some students, as you see in the bottom, it says special education classes. Students are classified students who have a resource or a learning lab. We will have end of year annual reviews and really help individualize and fill in the schedule. I tell students to pick the 2 electives that they would like to take, and then we'll make any changes needed at that annual review. If you see where it says the first elective, fine and performing arts, there is a graduation requirement that students take 1 credit in the area of art, music, or technology. And students take that likely freshman year because they have room for it. So when I talk about the electives in a little bit, I'll highlight those classes that fulfill that requirement, and I'll direct students to choose that option first, and then they'll choose another elective of their, liking. So math. Students will have a period of math next year in 9th grade, depending on what they're taking now. Students who are taking Math 8 will go into algebra or algebra extended. Algebra extended is a class that allows an additional alternate day period lab for reinforcement, students who need more time. And for the class, it's a great option. It culminates the end with the regions, just like Algebra 1 does. It just builds in more time for the class. So there's an every other day lab. And so you would understand that every other day lab does impact the elective options. For students who are recommended for this class, they would then have a period and a half left for elective options. Those students who are in currently taking algebra, they'll be recommended for either geometry or geometry honors. Geometry honors, typically the recommendation is a 95 or above. That's where that waiver process comes in, depending on what the recommendation is. Geometry honors is more rigorous, is more independent work. So those are the options in math. For science, all students who are in Science 8 will go into earth science. Those students currently in earth science will have the same thing like math, will have the option of bio and bio honors, and the teachers will be making that recommendation. Similar to geometry, the honors class has some independent component. It has students are expected to go above and beyond, and there's, like I said, some independence expected there. All these classes, the descriptions are in the course description guide as well. So this is the waiver that I mentioned. This waiver will be located on the website, on our JJMS website, as well as in the counseling center. I'll try to put it in other locations as well. So after the recommendation is made by the math and science teachers, if you, after talking to your child, want to do something, a class that's different from the recommendations, we require this waiver by the deadline. Humanities program. So we talked about math and science. Students will take English and global social studies. Those classes are built into the schedule. There's no options there. And then students will continue in their world language. As I mentioned earlier, they're taking a 3-year sequence, 6th, 7th, and 8th, earning them a credit. And we'll finish the level 1 of their language, and then they'll go into level 2 of that language. So students who are in Spanish will go into Spanish 2. We have another class of students who started in alternate day Spanish in 6th and 7th, or in everyday Spanish in 8th grade, and they'll go into Spanish 2A. Same thing, French students who are in French 1 will continue in French 2, and the same with Latin. Depending on enrollment, we typically offer, Latin 1. Some students in the high school pick up an additional language. and they could take Latin 1. We sometimes offer Spanish 1. Mentioning this because if a student and I would ask them to speak to me about that, there is an option to switch a language into Latin in 9th grade and start level 1. There's some pros and cons to that. So if that's something, if you really, for some reason aren't liking the language and want to make a switch, I'm happy to speak to your child or you about that. But those are the options for language. So fine and performing arts. Now we're going to move into talking about the elective options for next year. So in addition to the core requirements, English, social studies, math, science, physical education, and world language, now we're going to focus on those opportunities for electives for choice. And I just want to start by saying that there's really no better option. It's really about students starting to make decisions about what they're interested in, where they want to focus. In middle school, everybody takes unified arts, you take music. Now you have the option to choose what you want to take, and that class that you choose is likely going to be more in depth. And so it should be something that you are interested in, that you have a passion for. The elective offerings in art are studio art and design. It's an intro class to art at the high school, and it's a little bit of everything, including, so it's an introduction to film, to ceramics, to sculpture, collage, painting, drawing. It's a little bit of everything. And that fulfills the art, music, technology requirement that I spoke about earlier. We also are offering, which is new for 9th graders this year, a studio arts project. That's for students really interested in doing a project-based learning in a certain area. Whether it's filmmaking, ceramics, an independent project, those are students who love to create. It might be a situation where a student is taking another elective, but wants some art experience in addition. We also offer photography 1 and 2. I'm going to show you in a minute just how this might work in the schedule. And I'll just briefly go over these. Again, there's a description, and a lot of which I'm trying to read as we're talking. It's all in the course description book. When I go and meet with students, I will give them a list of all the electives and the descriptions to take home. I'll also put a copy of that online so you can read further about them. And the performing arts, we offer for electives, concert band, orchestra, vocal jazz, singing, introduction to theater, and a music history and theory class. Some of our students who are taking general music this year, the music history and theory is a nice option for students. It's held in the Mac lab at the high school, and it trains students in reading, writing, and understanding music in a hands-on learning environment. They use software such as GarageBand and other things. And some of these classes have sequences. You can understand, there's studio art. If you're interested in art and you take studio art, and then after that, there's many other art classes. And again, in the course description guide, they show you all kind of a flow chart of all the different options. Other electives that are offered, we offer a business dynamics course. It's an introductory course which explores topics of advertising, consumer purchasing, entrepreneurship, some useful skills of budgeting, credit cards, investing. So it's an introduction, a business course. I will say some electives are prerequisites for other classes, but in looking in the course description guide, not many. So business dynamics, there's other classes like accounting and advertising that follow that are in the business area, but you don't have to take business dynamics to take those classes. The same thing for art. There's other art classes, but studio art doesn't seem to be a prerequisite for those classes. So take note, in a few classes, there are some prerequisites for other classes moving forward, like computer science, which I'll get to in a second. So design and draw for production is a technology class, introduces to the CAD, and other things. And it's in the area of technology for students who want to, you have the filling that requirement in either art, music, or technology. If you're not interested in art or music, design, draw for production is a technology class that fulfills that requirement. Lastly, computer science 1 and 2, which is offered. So this sheet just has all the.
1 second. Sorry, everybody. A couple of questions that came through based on that, and then we'll get back to the elective choices. One, either again for you, Jen, or for Marissa, does studio art 1, 2, and photography 1, 2 meet the graduating requirements?
So studio, if you look at this sheet that I just put up now, it says, I don't know if my, so the START classes all fulfill the art, music, and tech requirements. So to answer your question, studio art and design does fulfill the art, music, tech requirement, that 1 credit requirement for graduation, as does concert band, music history and theory, orchestra, vocal, jazz, and introduction to theater. So the other classes, while they're obviously earn a credit, they don't fulfill that art, music, tech requirement. So studio projects, which is a new offering for 9th graders, does not fulfill that requirement. But if a student, like I said, some options here, if somebody wanted to take concert band, fulfills the art, music, tech requirement, and then wants to take photography or likes art too, could take the studio projects 1 and 2. Also, it's a little confusing. If you stay with me here, the full credit daily classes are self-explanatory. That class meets every day for the whole year. So studio art, business dynamics, design and draw, all these classes meet every day for the year. Most of these classes fulfill that requirement for graduation minus business dynamics. So if you were to take business dynamics, it would be in addition to one of the starred classes, and that would be your 2 full periods right there. Other options include these half credit every other day, all year classes. So what that means, introduction to theater 1 means every other day for the whole year. So someone can take, for example, any one of the full credit courses and introduction to theater every other day. The only thing that would alternate with the introduction to theater is a study hall. And I just want to say something about study hall. For those students who have a rigorous course load, who might have things after school like sports or activities, it is totally fine to take a study hall. You don't need to fill everything up because it looks better. It's really about taking classes you're interested in. If you're interested in 2 of those electives and you feel like you have time in your schedule and your after school curricular schedule, then that's fine. But it's also fine, I would say, especially for those who are considering honors classes, to take a study hall every other day or every day would be totally fine to take one of the start classes that fulfill the requirement and then take a study hall as the additional elective. And a study hall is not credit bearing. You don't earn credit. Obviously don't get a grade, but the requirement for graduation is 22 credits. It is something that's not to worry about. The earning credits is something most students will have way beyond that. You could take a study hall every year and still have plenty of credits to graduate. So some other things. So the everyday half-year courses, computer science and photography, those classes meet every day for the first half of the year, computer science. And then computer science 2 meets every day for the second half of the year. So different than alternate day classes. So most students will sign up for 1 and 2, but ultimately, if say you had a spring sport and wanted to try computer science or photography, but you don't necessarily have to continue to the level 2 of that class. So that's how that would work, though. You would have to take computer science 1 or photography 1, studio projects 1 in the fall, and it's up to you. Most students will take both of them, and that together will be a full credit elective course.
All right, can I just jump in here
Yeah.
again? I saw Miss Merlino pop in there for a minute, and this very well could be better for Miss Merlino. And I think either connected to that or probably what you just said, Jen, but there's a question here. It says, Do students select the whole year's schedule at once? For example, if they take photography 1 in the fall and want to see how it goes before deciding what to take in the spring, is that possible? So maybe Marissa, that's a little bit more for you.
Sure, sure. Yes, that's definitely possible. I would say
Just can't hear you, Marissa. I don't know if you can, if you're
Oh.
muted or unmuted.
I'm not.
Oh, that's true.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Sorry. Hi, everyone. So for the courses like photography, yeah, students can just take the first half of the year, but I would say I'd recommend scheduling students for both photography 1 and 2 because it's easier to drop a course sometimes than to try to fit it into a schedule later. So it's always kind of better to have it and then not need it versus again, maybe that class fills up and then the student can't get into the second half. So I'd recommend scheduling for both.
Great. Thank you. I think, okay, while we have you on, Ms. Merlino and Ms. Makover, if students didn't take accelerated math in middle school, is there an opportunity for them to take to switch to accelerated for high school? So I'll read that again. If students didn't take accelerated math in middle school, is there an opportunity for them to switch to accelerated math for high school?
Sure. So in high school, we do have a program. It's called GAP, which stands for Geometry, Algebra 2, and Pre-Calculus. And in that course, we take those 3 courses and we have them run over 2 years. So students would go into 9th grade and take algebra, then they go into 10th grade and take GAP 1, 11th grade and take GAP 2, and then senior year, they're able to take calculus. So that's kind of the accelerated way of students to get to calculus by their senior year in the high school.
Great. Thank you. We have another question in there that we'll answer a little bit later in our presentation. Thanks, Ms. Makover. Back to you.
Okay. So I think we've covered the electives. I know it gets a little confusing. Just understanding how the full credit every day, full year class, earning a credit, half a credit courses, introduction is really only introduction to theater, means every other day. That could be combined with a study hall. And then the half year courses, which as Marissa said, you're really signing up for both of them, but you could decide not to continue in the next sequence, the studio projects 2, photography 2, or computer science 2. And again, I would, it would be really helpful at some point to look in the course description guide at the high school, but I will be putting this presentation along with the list of electives with their descriptions on the website as well. And I will be handing them out to students when I present to them in class. I'll also use this and I wouldn't worry. It might be, depending on the type of student you have, they might come home and talk about the fact that I went into classes and have some materials that I handed out. Some, might not mention it at all, or even, they might lose these materials. And I just want to say it's fine either way. There's nothing that they're going to need that's different than what I'm saying to you and what would be online. I use this worksheet as simply a worksheet to show a visual for students. If you look down, I have the 1 through 9 periods. Some are built in: English, social studies, science, the science lab, PE, math. There's a spot next to it to indicate what math they'll be in the following year. And at that point, the recommendations won't be set. So if I might have them write algebra or algebra extended or geometry honors, just so they understand how the piece of the puzzle fits in. Same thing with world language. A period of lunch. They always ask me, is lunch 7th period? I say that, no, this is just a list of the classes. It doesn't mean you'll have them these periods, but ultimately what they're left with is 2 periods of elective. We'll go through all the fine and performing arts, the classes that we spoke about that fulfill the art, music, tech requirement. I asked them to make a preliminary choice of what they think they might be interested in. They'll have time to ask questions, look at the descriptions, and then make a second choice as well. So that's our opportunity to preliminarily talk about this, and then I follow up with them in classes, and the portal will open at home for you to talk at home and then input what they think. And then I follow up with them. So there's a lot of checking in, and there's about what they want to take. But this is just a worksheet that I will hand them out in class. It's a double-sided worksheet. I'll take a copy just so I have a reference for myself, and that they have a visual as well. It's not expected that they hand it in or that they keep it, but it'll help me when I meet with them in February to have something to refer to. So separately, I just wanted to also mention that I will be visiting students in classes in March and April. You know, we're talking a lot about the nuts and bolts of the scheduling process and just choosing classes. There's a lot more things to consider about the high school. So I'll take the opportunity to go into classes and talk about extracurricular activities. There's a lot of offerings at the high school, whether it be clubs, sports. I'll get a list of what's offered at the high school, and I'll share it with them and talk a little bit about getting involved, starting to pursue your passions. We actually talk a little bit about just, activity sheet, something unlike it's different from the transcript, which reflects, their academic profile. There's more for students that are looking to go to college. There's more that goes into that process, and it's really about who they are as a person and what their passions are and what they've pursued. So we talk about a little bit about activity resumes of what they've done in the middle school and what they hope to pursue at the high school, extracurricularly. And then we end the presentation. I asked them to write a little bit, just a letter introducing themselves to their high school counselor. Like here at the middle school, they'll be assigned a counselor at the high school for all 4 years, and that person will get to know them. And for those pursuing college, will be integral part of the college process. And it's nice to get to know them at the beginning. There'll be a transition process where the counselors will be meeting with the 9th grade students. But so it's something we'll send up to the counselors at the high school. Just some things to consider as part of the transition: time management, independence, and responsibility. I mean, these are obvious things of, choosing classes that, round out your schedule and your commitments. So again, as I mentioned, like a study hall is a great option if you have a child who plays 3 sports or is part of the drama or the theater, and you want to consider the academic rigor as well as like the time management, and a study hall might be a great option. Organization, whatever system works for your child, there's the planner or something online, just the organizational piece is huge. And self-advocacy, establishing relationships with teachers and school council early on, advocating. Students should be interacting directly with their, with their teachers and their counselors, and advocating for their best interests. And just, as I mentioned already, getting involved in something. Everybody really should, there's so much offerings at the high school, and hopefully every student will get involved in some capacity. And lastly, just pursuing your interest. When we talk about electives, it's exciting because it's the first time, students could really choose a class and start to pursue things that they're interested in. So lastly, we just listed about the calendar events that are coming up. I know Mr. Skradowitz also sent this out as a blast, and it'll be part of the presentation, this PowerPoint on the website. So just, we mentioned the parent orientation at the high school on the 24th, the New York State ILS performance tests, those are the dates, the boat trip at the end of the year, local exams, the Regents exam. So these are all the dates that we have now, the moving up ceremony and the last day for students. So that's just a list of dates to refer to.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions online. There was one question, either Ms. Merlino or Ms. Makover. Can the piece about GAP be repeated? I don't know if that means just what the 3 courses are, or like what the purpose is, but I will just tell you the purpose is to take 3 years and smush them into 2. So it is a faster thing to allow students to get to, I think it was calculus before they graduate.
I
high
don't
school.
mind adding a little to that because,
Sure,
you know, we talk a lot about the middle school accelerated. Accelerated is really a middle school term that means students are taking 9th grade level math or science in 8th grade. In the high school, they don't use the term accelerating. It's just the different levels of classes you're in, whether you're starting in 9th grade taking earth science or you're starting in 9th grade taking bio. So for the math question, to accelerate, what Marissa was saying, you have the opportunity to accelerating ultimately gets you to calculus senior year. If you don't accelerate in middle school and take algebra in 8th grade, then you will get to pre-calculus senior year. So the gap class affords another opportunity to get to calculus senior year, and the acceleration process happens in 10th and 11th grade, where you're taking, as Mr. Suarez said, you're squishing 3 years of math in a 2-year sequence. So it still goes algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, calc. But if you're taking algebra 9th grade, the gap class, the geometry, algebra 2, and pre-calc are going to be taken 10th and 11th grade. So you take calculus senior year. So that's another opportunity to, if you don't accelerate in the middle school, that it accelerates those 3 courses in 10th and 11th. You make that decision, not now, so at 9th grade towards the end, because you're taking algebra either way. So that's not something you have to really consider now. I would say if student is doing really well in math 8 and they go to algebra next year, then you see how it's going. And I just want to mention another option besides like accelerating and getting to calculus senior year. There's also honors options for every math and science after algebra and after earth science. So students who are taking algebra or earth science, either 8th or 9th grade, after they finish that math and science, the next sequence, bio, as we mentioned earlier, it's either bio or bio honors. It's either chem or chem honors, physics or physics honors. So there's 2 great opportunities for students who didn't accelerate but are performing well in 9th grade. They can have an honors track in 10th, 11th, and 12th, and that might be a better, more suitable option than trying to, accelerate into the gap or struggle. And if for those students who didn't accelerate in 8th grade and are doing really well, they have a very nice option in the honors sequence. So I just feel like all options are available for students, and their readiness is important. So if in 8th grade or last year in 7th grade, when we made recommendations for math and your student wasn't maybe quite ready, is in math 8 and killing it right now, they can go into algebra next year and then do geometry honors, algebra 2 honors, pre-calc honors, and that's really a great track. Same with the science. So there's honors options, there's accelerating, all those options are available.
Ms. Merlino, anything you want to add just in terms of this process? I will just tell you, everybody here online, I sat on the other end of this last night as a parent. My son's a junior, so I listened to what colleges are looking for. And one of the things that connects is like, they talk a lot about like sustained interest in things, doing well, but like to your level, that you don't want to take 5 AP classes and get C's and D's on your AP classes. So like the right match is really, really important. And that really came through to me last night and hearing back from some colleges. Ms. Moreno, anything else you wanted to add just on the things Ms. Makover has already talked about as well?
No, I would say you both covered that very well. And again, I would say the only reason to accelerate is to get to calculus, but colleges do not require that students are in calculus. So unless, there is a specific program that your child, isn't going for engineering or something that may, require that calculus, I would say there's no reason to accelerate and try to get on that fast track, because, it would be the honors track, if you're looking for that rigor, is equally appealing to colleges, and you get the additional 5 points on your GPA for an honors course, so that's an added bonus as well. So So again, that's definitely something to talk about with your high school counselor when you're ready to make that next decision for math, whether, the accelerated kind of path is the way you want to go or the honors path.
And I'll just add something too about that, reiterate what Mr. Swiatowicz, what Jeff said about really, because I do get asked that, like, what's better, what looks better? And it's really about you being successful in the most rigorous course that you could, again, be successful in. And just to consider your interests and where you want to spend the time. I mean, you have to consider too, your student might be able to handle the rigor of an honors class or accelerated class. And unfortunately, we offer only at this point math and science. There will be opportunities for humanities classes, for enrichment, for honors options. So if your student is a humanities student, but can do, honors math and accelerated science and do all that, but also has things outside of school, you want to consider where you're spending the time, and there will be opportunities in other areas too. So just consider not the overload of you should do something in honors that's enriching, that's more time, but you should like it. So it's about your readiness as well as your interest in what you want to do, and that sustained interest. I have a daughter in college, and so I went through the college process. It's, showing your interest over time, not just taking things that doesn't look good, is what you're interested in, and that you've demonstrated that passion and consistency over time with it.
And again, Ms. Merlino, anything else you want to add? I think I'm seeing a comment in the Q&A. It says the biggest thing that we're worried about is the path that we set our kids on over this next couple of years. So any other advice or anything you've heard from parents over the years, you or Ms. Makover, what are those concerns? How can we alleviate some of those? I really like the recommendation of a study hall. High school is a big change. And especially that freshman year, if your child is a child who has struggled academically, set them up for success with a study hall, so that they're not inundated with it, not only not a study hall, but another class worth of academics and homework, et cetera. So I like that recommendation, but Ms. Merlino, anything else you want to add? Just from, I'm sure the many parents you've heard, not just 8th to 9th, but then 9th to 10th and 10th to 11th, et cetera.
So I would say one of the biggest challenges we see with the students in the high school is that they feel overwhelmed, and that becoming overwhelmed causes them a great deal of stress and anxiety because they feel like they have to take on these very rigorous courses, like 5 AP courses, in order to impress colleges. And I will tell you that oftentimes that takes a toll on students' mental health. So there is that balance of what's doable. What is appropriate for your student, which courses come naturally and are easier. Like if your student is a math or science student, maybe you take the rigorous courses in math and science, and in English and social studies, we don't have that same level of rigor. It's all about balance. We preach about balance so much at the high school because our students have such full lives. They're here, for 7 hours a day, and then they go off to activities all night long, and they just can't. They're telling us in so many ways they just can't do it all. So we need to prioritize what's most important and really kind of make sure that we're taking all things into consideration when choosing things like an appropriate schedule.
And you have interviews with graduating students, right? They come back and speak to you. Is there any knowledge that you can share with our 8th grade families about what you're hearing from the freshmen freshmen in college when they come back?
I would say the number one thing they say is how well prepared they are, that they really feel like, John Jay has given them an extraordinary education, that they're very prepared in their college courses to tackle the research papers or, their science courses, and we have a lot of research opportunities in the high school, which also prepares them. So I would say that's our job in the high school, is to prepare them for college readiness, and for, in almost every instance, students come back and say, we met that goal.
All right, 2 specific questions. If my child is in extended algebra how does the half credit work with an elective? Is the extended algebra lab every day, every other day? How do you successfully pair with a half credit elective to reach the total of 2 full elective credits?
So I'll answer it. You don't require to have 2 full electives. In the case if algebra extended, it has a period of algebra every day with the lab. So like PE and like the science lab, that means alternate every other day, and you'd be left with a period and a half of elective options. So you'd have the opportunity to pick 1 whole elective, the art, music, tech requirement, and fulfill that. A student could take a study hall opposite the math lab, or they could take intro to theater. Those are the only combinations that will fit in that sequence. And I just want to mention for students, if you're for classified students who have a resource in a learning lab, you can understand that that further takes from the elective options. We have a few classes that we can make exceptions, like the studio arts project, maybe even vocal jazz and band, where if there's only, if you think about it, if you're taking the extended lab for math and you're taking a resource or learning lab, that would leave a half a credit option for electives. There'll be more opportunities to take electives further on. You will have plenty of credits to graduate. It's about building the right supports in your schedule. So not everybody will have 2 periods of electives. You might have 1.5, you might have a half, but we will work with you to still be able to take something and make exceptions for a few classes to take every other day to have an experience in something you're interested in. And again, at the annual reviews, that will be discussed personally. So you don't have to worry about that now, how that fits. We will have a conversation based on what the CSE recommends and what elective option are left and what periods you have left, and we will finalize the schedule then individually.
Okay, thank you. Last question. If we choose 1 elective plus a study hall, would computer science be available sophomore year or later?
I would say yes, but I'll defer to Marissa that will be available. You could take it as a 9th grader or a 10th grader, but computer science 1 and 2, they have there's a following sequence to that. So to get the whole sequence, I just have to look at the course description guide. You might, I know there's gaming, there's other classes that follow up, and computer science 1 and 2, I believe, are a prerequisite to the next sequence. So you want to look at that and you'll have time to do it. It's available for 9th graders through 12th grade. Marissa, do you want to say anything about it?
I would just say, so yeah, students can go to computer science 1 and 2, 10th grade, 11th grade. We do have 2 other computer science courses in the high school. We have an AP Computer Science A, which is a programming course. And then we have AP Computer Science Principles, which is more of a survey course in computer science. So neither of those courses, though, require a prerequisite of computer science. So we would recommend that students do have some type of computer background in order to take those courses, but we don't recommend, we don't require students to have computer science 1 and 2 in order to take those courses.
Great, thank you. That is it for our questions online. Any questions from our expansive audience?
Our audience members. And I'll just lastly say that's my contact information. We have this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up. Just know there is a process. I will be going into classes after break. There will be recommendations made. So please, I'd recommend you get all the information in terms of, having your students hear my presentation, having the teachers make recommendations. And then when you have a more full picture of what the recommendations are and you have questions, I think part of those questions will be filled in. But I'm happy to talk with you individually at any point to discuss your child's choices.
And again, unlike other places around here, other towns around here, the parents are part of that placement process. So I know Ms. Makover put up the waiver process before. That is March 31st. You'll have a lot of information before then. And then again, like we've talked a lot about kind of taking the pressure off. That's not what all families believe in. Some families do believe in getting ahead through high school so that students can be successful in college. we do allow parents as part of the waiver process. So just know that, but that timeline is set so that we can make sure that we have spaces for your child next year as we run those courses. So we have to have that by the 31st. We do welcome you as part of the placement process for your child. Anything else from our audience members? Any questions? All right. Thank you very much to everybody. Cheryl, you want to do your sign off?
Hi. I just want to thank everybody for coming today. And everyone's questions were answered, and if not, there will be further opportunities. You can always contact staff over. So thank you very much and have a good day. And just this, we are recording this, and it will hopefully at some point be up online. Thank you.